Okay, so this talk is Inclusion is Accessibility. I went through a few different iterations of a title. I started out thinking product inclusion, but some experiences happened between when I had the idea for this talk and now. So there's some changes. So I'm Nikema Prophet. I was here back in 2019 for this event. It was my first time speaking at a conference, and this is coincidentally my second time speaking at a conference, and it's with All Things Open, so I'm super excited. So this section is called The Sequel because this is kind of a continuation of the first talk I gave about barriers to entry, trying to get into tech, and I can't do it. But I did it. I'm in tech now. I work at company XYZ. You know, it was announced earlier. That's me when I was here in 2019. And this was me. Let me in, because it was a struggle. It was a struggle. But I wrote all about it. I made a blog post about what I think were the factors that allowed me to get in. So I'm going to use my working definitions of inclusion and accessibility. When I say inclusion, I am meaning I feel safe, I feel I belong, I feel welcomed, and I feel like there's an opportunity, avenues for equity and justice. For accessibility, I mean in the literal sense, like, do I have access? Do I have access to work in the field of my expertise and be hired? Do I have access to inclusive products? And can I be a part of building products? And access to inclusive communities in our tech space. So I want to ask the leaders who hear this talk to be intentional about tackling this issue. Ask somebody. And when I say ask someone, I mean people like me who have experienced being excluded, who have experienced being left behind, but also people who are experts in diversity and inclusion, equity, justice. Hire the experts, hire the people with lived experience, but make sure you pay me what you owe me. Okay, what do people need to feel safe and included? I kind of forgot when I went back, when I started, sorry. This is all from my experience. I am not an expert, but I am the leading expert in my life experience. So all of this, take it as one person's opinions, one person's perspective, I guess. So what do people need to feel safe and included? For myself, that is safety, safety at events, and physical safety is something that I think is not talked about as much as maybe psychological safety, but that's included. The event that I kind of alluded to earlier about things happened between the inception of the talk and now. And one of the things that happened was I attended a tech conference in rural Oregon, and I felt unsafe. I felt unsafe as a Black person in that town. The first thing I saw when I drove into town, because this is a place like 3 hours from the Portland airport, I drove in from California. First thing I saw was a huge Confederate flag at the grocery store. And then the rest of my time there, I did not see other Black people, and I didn't see other ethnicities either. I just saw only white people and like nature. So it wasn't until I got to the conference that I started to see people of color. But I objectively felt unsafe. I was at that conference with my family. I brought my kids with me, and it was rough to have to explain the Confederate flag and the racist history of Oregon, the anti-Black history of Oregon, to my children. And for them to feel unsafe because of racism is something that I wouldn't expect to feel in 2022. And I do know that racism is everywhere. I know that anti-Blackness is everywhere, but I'm used to the California flavor of it, and the Oregon flavor of it was a totally different thing where people would not speak to us. It was just, I've never experienced anything like that. So I say physical safety. Oh gosh. I say physical safety because just because we're intact, we are not protected we're not protected for our physical safety. So I saw people I knew at the conference, but what about all the time that I had to spend outside of the conference? Another point about safety is alcohol. When we have so many events centered around alcohol, to me, that's making a potentially unsafe event, and it's making it difficult for people for a variety of reasons. It's also something that will lower inhibitions, and people will not behave in the way they should. So I wonder why we have so many networking and so many industry events that center around alcohol. For events, also a code of conduct with enforcement is needed, not just the code, but like, are you taking it seriously? Are there consequences for breaking it? And I'm gonna keep saying this, but ask the experts because I'm not one. Let's see. Accommodations. This was my quote. It's just some of the most qualified and creative people you will never work with are disabled or otherwise denied access. I say that because I experienced it. I am a single mom, and being a parent that is taking care of 2 children, I can't do things like synchronous blocks of time. One example is I had a scholarship to a coding boot camp, which was 100% remote, but you had to be there from 9 to 5. So those are things that are excluding people who would otherwise be able to do the work on their own time. I know there are reasons for wanting synchronous activity, but you really are cutting a lot of people out. In general, I would say flexible schedules would help. Offering remote work would help. Quiet spaces at work, at events, and ways to contribute that don't require video or real-time communication. I think it's, as someone with anxiety and social anxiety, and for various reasons just not being comfortable on camera, to require that someone is on camera and communicating with you in real time might be making things harder for people with certain neurodivergence and disabilities. Again, ask the experts. Economic inclusion, I'm probably not gonna go, I don't wanna go too long. Economic inclusion and financial trauma is another thing I experienced, just when there are assumptions made about what your economic status is, where I had scholarships to go to events before I had money, before I had my tech job. And I needed a credit card. I needed a credit card to check into a hotel, and I was actually had to go home because I did not have that. So whenever you're assuming, even for people who are employed, don't assume to know what's affordable for them. Don't assume anything about their financial status, because I can tell you right now, I got my tech job in 2020. I'm currently working at a big company, and my financial situation is probably not what people would expect for the people who make the amount of money I make. Oh, I forgot one point, which is this is your final notice. Like, those type of communications are actually a trigger. Like, if you're creating like marketing content and you use those type of subject lines like that sound like a bill collector, it's a trigger. So product inclusion, I think lots of people are considering community as a product now. And again, safety, psychological safety, physical safety. How do you make people feel welcome? And how do you onboard new members? So if I see your community and I want to join, who do I go to? Like, are people going to welcome me? Are they going to be cold? Are they even gonna respond when I reach out? Having those things in place go a long way. So with marketing and communication for your products, don't disrespect your audience. Saying things like, oh, this is so easy, your grandma could do it, or your mom could do it. Like, that's inappropriate, and being a mom or grandma doesn't say anything about your technical ability. We all know that, but things like that slip through. Provide introductory content. So yes, you will want to cater to your engineers and technologists who are professionals and working, at the top of the field. But if you want to be inclusive, you have to include the people who are not here yet. So having introductory content in addition to the developers that maybe you want to reach will make people feel more included. Consider the reading levels of the average person. Consider that, and let's not use overly technical terms, jargon, when it's not necessary. And this was similar to the financial trauma issue. It's like, avoid anxiety-inducing titles and subject lines, things that like make you feel like something is urgent or an emergency when it's not. So for access in open source, I would say create ways for everyone to contribute. Everyone who's interested should have something they can do. Lower financial barriers to participate, meaning if you are in need of even like a very high-powered computer, things like that, if there's no other way to contribute than to already have access to things that cost a lot of money, that's a barrier. To respect our people in different time zones in different countries. Let's have events, let's have activity that happen in different time zones. And documentation is huge, because if nothing is documented, if there are no policies, then people don't know what to expect, and they don't know what protections they're entitled to. It also helps for new contributors and people who are joining your community to know what to expect. On hiring and career growth, I would say watch out for putting things in your listings that may be accidentally discriminatory. Like, I saw a job listing that said, we're looking for young and energetic XYZ. And I was like, that is openly ableist and discriminating. Passion, like what's wrong with passion? Nothing's wrong with passion, but if you require passion from someone to do a job, you're saying that this job needs to become the first-class citizen in this person's life, that they need to be working on this job when they're not working, that they need to have this burning passion to do the job. And that's not required to get a job done and to get a job well. Underrepresented groups encouraged to apply. This is kind of annoying to me, because to me, it's like, show me, don't tell me. If you're telling me to apply, what do your diversity numbers look like currently? I don't need permission to apply. I want to see that I'm joining an employer that values me and values people from my background. Also, I would like to see more access to apprenticeships and internships. I think the underrepresented groups kind of get crumbs in a lot of ways, where there are programs set aside where you can learn and earn money at the same time, but they end up being so limited in capacity that you still kind of have to be the best of the best to earn a spot. So that kind of defeats the purpose of an apprenticeship, in my opinion, where someone can learn a trade or learn a craft and get paid to do it, instead of already being job ready to get the opportunity. So I would like to know, like, how can we enable people to not just get hired, but to stay here in our industry? My suggestion for all of us is to lift as you climb. There is a lot of content, a lot of like rallying around, let's get people into tech. But once you get here, you don't necessarily know how to stay here, and you don't have the culture. Like, if you're coming from this underrepresented group and you're jumping into a whole new industry, a whole new like corporate culture, those things, you do not know the unspoken rules unless someone teaches you. So I would like to see all of us who are here make sure that we are bringing people up with us and being transparent and honest about our experiences. I didn't know anything about PIPs or performance improvement plans. I had no idea how to navigate that. And it wasn't until after I left my job that I started learning from other people about how that goes and what it means to be managed out. Those are not things that we can assume that people know. If they don't know it, they don't know. So I kept saying, refer to the experts, and these are some of the experts that I know. Cheryl Ingram founded Diversity Group. I have Diversify Tech, Veni Kunchi, I don't know, I hope I didn't say her name wrong, and Black Tech Pipeline, founded by Paris Athena. And I am done. Thank you so much for listening and for letting me